Hello and welcome to Relatable Code. In this video, we will talk about lists in Kotlin. So let's get started. So we're back to our library example. What are lists in Kotlin? Well, you can think of lists as, for example, a group of items that share the same type. Okay? And we're going to take an example now. Let's say in our library, we want to have a certain schedule so that the customer can know about our opening hours. Okay? So we have some opening hours for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and every other day of the week. Okay? And we want to represent that in a variable. So how can we do that? For that, we can create a list since we need to create a schedule for Monday and every other day of the week. So they all share the common type, which in this case would be a string. Okay? So here I'm going to start and write, let's say val opening hours equals, and the first question that I ask myself is about this list. Will it be an immutable list or a mutable list? So is this a list that I will be planning on adding some extra items to? In our case, no, because we only have 7 days in a week. Okay, what about the existing items in this list? Will I modify them anytime in the future? Let's say in our example, this is a fixed schedule. Okay, so we will not change any date in the schedule. So for that, we have a completely immutable list. And to represent that, we use the keyword list of. Okay. Here you're prompted to enter a type. You don't need to actually do that because when you enter the first item in this list, it will automatically know the type. Okay, and we agreed that our types will be strings. So how can we do that? We open these quotations for the string and we write, for example, Monday, 9 a.m. dash, for example, 5 p.m. Okay. This is now a list, despite the fact that it only contains one item so far, but that's because this item is wrapped inside this list of keyword. Okay, so we currently have a list containing one item. So how can I add more items to this list? I enter a comma, and here I write another item or another schedule in our case. So we write Tuesday. We also want it to be 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. And we do the same for the rest of the days. Here I press Ctrl D to duplicate, and I write Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and let's say I close my library on Sunday. Okay, so Sunday closed. And that's about it. That's how you create an immutable list in Kotlin. So in this list, I can't modify the existing items, and I can't add or remove items to this list. Okay? Now, as we've discussed, this is a list where I can't modify the existing items in this list, and I can't add or remove items to this list. Okay, this is a completely immutable list. Now we have another type of list in Kotlin, a list where we can't add or remove items either, but we can change the existing items in this list. And I'll give you an example. So let's say in our library, we have like a reading room. Okay, and this reading room has some seats where our customers can sit and enjoy a certain book. Okay, so let's say val reading seats, and here I want these seats to have more than one state. Okay, I want these states to be, for example, empty and occupied, depending on whether or not a customer is sitting on that seat. So how can I do that, and how can I represent a list like this? Here we would use array of, okay? And as we've done in the previous example, we would write empty, comma, enter, empty, and that depends on the number of seats we have in our library. Okay, let's say we have 4. So here we have 4 empty seats. Okay, let's say a customer walks into our library and wants to use one of these seats. So I want to change the state of one of these 4 items or seats in my library to become occupied. Okay, so let's say our customer chooses the first seat in our reading room. How can I change this item to become occupied? Well, we can do this. Reading seats 0 equals occupied. Now, what is this? And why 0, not 1? Well, 0 here is an index, and an index in programming is like the order of an item. And in programming, you start counting from 0, not from 1. Okay? So this would be item number 0, this would be item number 1, this would be item number 2, and this would be item number or of index 3. Okay? That's basically how you count in programming. I know it may seem counterintuitive, but that's how it's done. And here we reference this list, and to get a certain item in this list, we need these brackets. Okay, so we open these brackets to look for an item, and here we're looking for the first item, so the item of index 0. Okay, since the customer chose the first seat in our library, that's how we access the first seat. And we have to modify its value, so we write equals occupied. Okay, now how can we make sure that this works? Here we write print line reading seats dot content to string. That's it. Let's run our application. This is getting pretty big, so we need to make this code a bit cleaner in the future. Okay. For now, let's check this output, and here you can see occupied, empty, empty, empty. That's our new list. Okay, that's how we can make sure that this list was indeed modified to change the first item to become occupied. Okay, but note that we can't do this for opening hours, and let's try to do it so that I can show you it doesn't work. Okay, so opening hours 0, I can access it, but I can't modify it, as you can see. Okay, so I can get the first item in the schedule, but I can't change it anymore. And that's the difference between list of and array of. Okay, with using list of, you can't modify any item in this list, and you can't add or remove any item. And when using array of, you can modify items like this, but you can't add or remove items. So this list has a predetermined size, like this list. Okay, the size won't change in the future, but the content in this list may change. Okay, now that's basically it for immutable lists, and now we're going to see mutable lists. Okay, mutable lists are basically lists that you can modify the existing items of, and you can add or remove items to those lists. Okay, so for example, I want to model a stack of books in my code. How can I do that? Well, I would write val stack of books equals, and I want a mutable list. Now I have two options. I will first explain the first option, which is array list of. So you would write array list of, and here, for example, you can write string, but we don't need that because After we enter the first item, as you can see, it's no longer required. So we can remove this type. That's why I removed it previously when I worked with list of. Okay. So in our stack of books, for example, let's say we have Harry Potter. Let's say we have, for example, Harry Potter 2 and Harry Potter 3. Harry Potter fans, please don't rage at me. I don't recall the exact titles of each film, but I love them. Okay. This is a list, an array list, which I can modify. So if I want to write stack of books 0 equals Harry Potter 4. I can definitely do that. Let's try to print it out. So I would print out stack of books, but in this case I can't use content toString. So instead I would use toString directly. Okay, let's try to print that out. Rerun our application. You can run directly from here. So here we have Harry Potter 4, 3, 4, 2, and 3. Okay. But more than that, we can also add items to this list. So I can go like stack of books dot add, and let's say we have Pride and Prejudice. Let's delete the print statement before this line and enter it after this line so that it can take effect with the new changes for the list, and rerun our application from here. And here you can see Pride and Prejudice was indeed added to our list. Okay. We can also remove items from our list, and we can do that by writing stack of books dot remove, and we can remove, for example, the first element in our book, in our stack of books, which was Harry Potter 4. Or let's just remove Harry Potter 2. We can do that like this. And now print line stack of books dot toString. Let's rerun it. And Harry Potter 2 was indeed removed. Okay. Another way you can remove items from this list is by writing stack of books dot remove at, and here you pass the index to this function. So I want to remove my first item. I would do it like that and run the application. Okay, nothing will get printed because the print line statement is before the remove at statement. Let's correct that and rerun our function again. And here you can see we only have two items now, Harry Potter 3 and Pride and Prejudice. That's because by default we had Harry Potter, then 2 and 3. We substituted the first book with Harry Potter 4. We added Pride and Prejudice, which got added to the end of the list. It gets added to the end by default. And then we removed Harry Potter 2 using remove. So we removed the second item in the list, and then we removed the first item, which was Harry Potter 4. Okay, that's how you can use the remove at function of the array list. Okay, so that was a list that had some more flexibility. I could modify the existing items in this list, and I could also add or remove items from this list. A similar list would be a mutable list, okay? And we can write it like this. So we can say val mutable stack of books equals mutable list of, We can remove these brackets. We can write the Great Gatsby to kill a mockingbird. I hope I wrote those correctly. And the mutable list is almost exactly the same like the array list. You can also modify existing items in this list. So you can say mutable stack of books 0 equals, for example, the Great Gatsby 2. You can print these books. Again, print mutable stack of books dot to string. Let's rerun the function. That's it. Basically the same as array list of, and you can also add or remove items similarly. You can write mutable stack of books dot add. We can add a new element. Let's just say new book. Print these books again. And then let's remove a book. Let's use the remove add function and print that again. So here we added new book. And here we removed the first book at index 0, which was The Great Gatsby 2. Okay. There are a lot of similarities between mutable list of and array list of. They are almost used interchangeably, which means they can almost replace each other. But if we go to the implementation of mutable list of, okay, we can see that, okay, here, we can see this is the one I want. By default, it in fact returns an empty array list. Okay, but an array list of returns just an array list, which is Java's array list. Okay, so mutable list of with respect to me is a bit more flexible than array list of because it already contains array list of by default as a default value, and it can contain other types of lists as well. Okay, as long as they are of type mutable list. That's why I prefer to use it more often than array list of, but they really share almost everything together. Okay, it's pretty rare to find some difference in use cases between both, but I'm just telling you my personal preference. Okay, so that was how you can create different types of lists in Kotlin. I hope you got the difference between list of, which is completely immutable. You can't change or add any items to this list. Array of, which is also kind of immutable because you can't add items to this list, but you can change existing items in this list, like we did here. We also have array list of and mutable list of, which share almost everything together. Okay, and you can modify existing items in these lists in addition to adding and removing items in these lists. But be careful with something, in particular the remove add function. If you try to remove an item at an index that doesn't exist, for example, let's say index 6, and try to run your application, you get an exception. Okay, so be extra careful when you use this remove add function. That's why I don't use it often. I prefer to use the remove function because even if you remove an item that doesn't exist, for example, Harry Potter 11, let's delete this remove add function and rerun the application. You don't get an exception. You just don't execute anything when you use remove and you pass an item that doesn't exist. Okay, so take note of that, please. Now, if you find my content relatable, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for future content, and I'll see you in the next video.